My name is Evelyn Carter and I was reborn on a Tuesday. Not in a hospital, not with a gasp and a cry, but on a scorching Georgia afternoon in my own backyard, the moment I turned 30. Cicadas screamed from the ancient pecan tree, a sound like tearing metal. The sun was a merciless white coin in the sky, baking the red Georgia clay in my yard until it shimmered. I was wrestling with our heavy winter quilt, the one his mother gave us, its faded floral pattern a relic of a life I thought I wanted. The stuffing warmed through, smelled of sunlight and dust and surrender. In my first life, it was at this exact moment that my world ended for the first time. Bang, bang, bang. The sound was a physical assault on the thick, hot air. The wrought iron gate to our yard in the Fort Benning officers' housing rattled violently. Evelyn Carter, you get out here right now. It was Martha Jennings from next door, her voice a siren of manufactured panic. She burst in without waiting, her face a mask of dramatic urgency. It's terrible. Just awful. Who Chase? Captain Chase, honey, he got gored. Out on the back ridge. That old Johnson bull. He's bleedin' something fierce. You gotta come. My hand holding a clothespin froze in midair. I remember this. Oh God, I remember this. In my first life when I heard those words, my soul seemed to shrivel and die on the spot. I dropped the quilt, it landed in the dirt and I ran after Martha like a wounded animal, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My mind went blank white with terror. He was my husband. The center of my universe. But that was the old Evelyn. The one who died at 30 from a cancer born of bitterness. Alone in a sterile hospital room while my husband and his mistress, my own cousin Chloe, planned their future with my house, my things, my life. Now the fear was gone. In its place was a cold, clear calm so absolute it was like being encased in ice. I slowly, deliberately finished pinning the corner of the quilt. I smoothed the fabric, ensuring it caught the full sun. Without looking up, I spoke. My voice sounded foreign to me, flat and cool. He got gored. And Martha Jennings blinked, her mouth hanging open. The script was already going wrong. And, Evelyn, your husband is laid out on that ridge. He might be dyin'. I turned and walked toward the garden hose coiled by the back steps. I turned the faucet, rinsed the dust from my hands. If he's dying, Martha, you should be calling an ambulance or finding the MPs. Not wasting time harassing me. I'm not a medic. Her face flushed a mottled red. Harassing you? I'm trying to save his life. You heartless. You're ice cold, you know that. So I've been told, I said, drying my hands on my apron. I walked past her, back into the relative cool of the kitchen. I could feel her stunned gaze on my back. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea from the pitcher in the icebox. The condensation on the glass was real. The tart sweetness on my tongue was real. This was real. I was really back. The storm beneath the ice began to churn. Chase Carter. Captain. Golden boy of the 3rd Brigade. And a consummate liar. In my first life I had run to that ridge. I'd found him covered in blood and dirt, his arms slung protectively around a weeping, perfectly unscathed Chloe. My cousin Chloe. Don't blame her, Evie, he'd gasped, his eyes glazed with pain. She was trying to help. It was an accident. And I, fool that I was, believed him. I believed her tear-streaked, delicate face. I spent the next month at his hospital bedside, playing the dutiful wife while she fluttered in and out with get-well cards and homemade soup, the picture of concerned family. That was the beginning of the end. The slow, grinding end that saw him grow cold, saw Chloe become a permanent fixture, saw me lose our baby when I found them together in our kitchen and he shoved me aside to protect her. I lost the baby. Then I lost my mother to the shock of it. Then I lost 10 years of my life to the gray prison of a hollow marriage, watching him climb to lieutenant colonel while she bore his child in a quiet apartment in Columbus. I died at 30, my body eaten by a resentment that had finally turned physical. And I swore with my last burning breath that if I ever got another chance I would watch them burn. I took another sip of tea. The clock on the wall ticked. The cicadas screamed. I was waiting. The gate didn't just rattle this time. It clanged open, hitting the fence with a crash. A black whirlwind entered my yard. Margaret Carter. My mother-in-law. She spotted me through the screen door, sitting calmly at my kitchen table and her face contorted. She was a tall, sharp woman who had always viewed me as a temporary and unsatisfactory placeholder for her perfect son. Evelyn Carter, she shrieked, bursting inside. The screen door slammed behind her. Have you lost your everlasting mind? Your husband is out there dying and you're sitting here sipping tea like it's Sunday social. What is wrong with you? I set my glass down slowly. In my first life, this woman's voice could reduce me to a trembling puddle. Now it was just noise. Margaret, I said, my voice still that unsettling calm. Perfect timing. I have a question for you. She sputtered, thrown off. A question? This is no time for. Is Chase your son? I interrupted. Or mine? She stared as if I'd sprouted a second head. What kind of stupid question is that? Of course he's my son. Well then, I said, standing up. Why is it that when your son gets gored by a bull, you don't run to help him? You run to my house to yell at me? Do you expect me, a 120-pound woman, to go wrestle a 1,000-pound bull? What's the plan here, Margaret? The red on her cheeks deepened to purple. You twist things. He's your husband. You took vows. For better or worse? For worse, I repeated. Is that what we're calling him, sneaking off to the back ridge with my cousin Chloe? That's a special kind of worse, don't you think? The words hung in the air. Margaret's mouth opened and closed. I could see the calculations behind her furious eyes. Deny? Deflect? How dare you? She finally landed on, the classic retreat of the guilty. You're slandering your own family to cover your own cold heart. Am I? I walked toward the door. Let's go find out then. Let's all go up to the ridge. You, me, and whoever else Martha has gathered. We can all see with our own eyes what kind of accident this really was. I pushed past her out into the blistering sun. A small crowd had indeed gathered in the lane between the rows of identical officer housing, curious wives, a few retired sergeants, their faces a mix of concern and lurid curiosity. My refusal to play my part was already the gossip of the hour. I started walking toward the path that led to the training ridges behind the post. I didn't look back, but I heard Margaret's furious huff and the shuffle of feet as the crowd, sensing a far better drama than a simple injury, fell in behind me. The path was familiar. I'd run it in panic once before. Now I walked it with a deliberate, steady pace. The pines offered little shade and the red dust coated my shoes. We could hear the commotion before we saw it, shouts, a low murmur of concern. We broke through the tree line into the small clearing on the ridge. And there was the tableau from my nightmares, rendered in brutal, sunlit detail. Chase lay on his side in the trampled broom sedge. His uniform shirt was torn and dark with blood, a shocking crimson against the olive drab. One leg was bent at a sickening, unnatural angle. His face was ash-gray. But it was his position that stole the breath from the crowd. He was curled, not in a fetal position of pain but in a protector's pose. And tucked tightly against his chest, her face buried in his neck, her floral sundress barely rumpled, was Chloe, my cousin. Her blonde hair was artfully disheveled. A single smudge of dirt on her cheek. She was sobbing delicate little hiccups that shook her slender shoulders. Oh my lord, someone whispered behind me. Is that Evelyn's kin? He's shieldin' her. Margaret let out a wail that was half genuine distress, half theatrical performance. My boy. Chase, my boy. She lunged forward, collapsing in the dirt beside him. She immediately turned her fury on Chloe. You little tramp. Look what you've done. Get away from him. She yanked at Chloe's arm. Chloe spilled onto the ground with a practiced, graceful weakness. She looked up, her cornflower blue eyes swimming with tears, and found me in the crowd. The look was pure, unadulterated calculation. Evie, she stammered, her voice a fragile thread. I'm so sorry, it was so terrible. The bull just came out of nowhere. Chase pushed me out of the way. He was perfect. The helpless victim. The damsel in distress. In my first life, this performance had shattered me. Now I just felt a distant academic admiration for her skill. I didn't look at her. I looked at Chase, at the blood seeping into the Georgia clay. A part of me, the old Evelyn, might have felt a pang. This was the man I'd loved. But that man had died long before I did. This was just the shell that had housed the monster. Somebody do something. Margaret shrieked, cradling Chase's head. Don't just stand there. A few men moved uncertainly forward, ready to hoist him up. Don't touch him. My voice cut through the panic. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Everyone froze. I walked forward, kneeling in the dirt opposite Margaret. I ignored her venomous glare. Chase was semi-conscious, his breathing shallow. The gash on his side was ugly, but the leg was the real problem. A compound fracture by the look of it. And possible spinal damage from the impact. If you haul him up like a sack of potatoes, you'll paralyze him or kill him, I said, my tone clinical. I sounded like a stranger even to myself. His leg is broken. His back might be. You need a backboard. A door, a plank, anything flat. You move him in one piece straight onto it. The men looked at me, then at each other, nonplussed. Who was this calm, commanding version of mousy Evelyn Carter? Don't you listen to her. Margaret spat. She wants him to die. She said so. I finally looked at my mother-in-law. My gaze was so cold I saw her flinch. Margaret, if he dies because you threw a tantrum and delayed proper care, that blood will be on your hands. Not mine. Now, are you going to help or are you going to keep performing for the neighbors? A young specialist's wife, Annie, piped up. My screen door is off its hinges. We were painting. I can get it. Go, I said, not taking my eyes off Margaret. Quickly. As Annie ran off, the scene settled into a tense silence, broken only by Chase's ragged breathing and Chloe's soft, incessant weeping. I became aware of every pair of eyes on me. The betrayed wife. The Ice Queen. Let them look. Let them see I was not broken. Chloe chose that moment to crawl toward me, her hand clutching at the hem of my shorts. Evie, please. You have to believe me. I looked down at her. Really looked. I saw the cunning beneath the tears, the triumph she couldn't fully hide. She thought she'd won. She thought this dramatic scene had cemented her place as the cherished victim, the one he'd risked everything for. A small, cold smile touched my lips. The game had just begun and she didn't even know we were playing. Believe you, I said softly so only she could hear. Then I raised my voice, turning to address the gaping crowd. I pointed to a spot a few feet away where a picnic basket lay overturned. Why don't you tell everyone what you were really doing up here, Chloe? Picking wild blueberries. I walked over and picked up a single vividly red mushroom cap that had rolled near the basket. I held it up. It gleamed waxy and poisonous in the sun. Or were you picking death caps? The silence that followed was thicker than the Georgia humidity. Every eye, previously darting between Chase's broken body and Chloe's tearful performance, now snapped to the small, lethal mushroom pinched between my fingers. The lurid red cap seemed to pulse against the dusty green of the clearing. Most of the folks here were Army, but they were also Southern. They knew the land. They knew which mushrooms you could fry up with butter and which ones would send you to the morgue. That's a destroying angel, old Sergeant Mulvaney grunted from the edge of the crowd, his voice like gravel. One bite'll shut your liver down 'fore you know what hit you. Chloe's face, so perfectly pale and pitiful a moment before, went a sickly gray. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. The practiced tears stopped mid-track. I didn't, she finally stammered, her voice a weak whisper. I thought it was pretty. I didn't know. Didn't know. I let out a short, humorless laugh that echoed in the quiet. Chloe, you lived with my family for 6 years after your mama passed. Granny Carter took us mushroom foraging every spring until our baskets were full. She drilled it into us. Red means dead, white is all right, but check the gills and check 'em twice. You telling me you forgot the very first rule? The one she made us chant. I took a step closer to her, the mushroom held between us like an accusation. Or were you and Captain Carter up here on this private ridge for something other than foraging? I let my gaze sweep over the secluded clearing, the overturned basket, the 2 canteens nestled together in the grass. The implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The crowd's murmur shifted. Sympathy for the poor, frightened girl curdled into something uglier, more suspicious. Whispers slithered through the pines. What were they doing all the way out here alone? Destroying angel. Lord have mercy. He was holding her mighty close for a cousin. Margaret found her voice, a screech of pure maternal defiance. You vicious little liar. You're trying to poison everyone against my boy while he's lying here helpless. She's making it up. I didn't even look at her. My eyes were locked on Chloe, watching the mask crack. Am I? Well, we can let the MPs sort it out. Adultery is one thing. But if there's any question about intent with a poisonous fungus found near a military officer and his companion, Well, I'm sure the JAG lawyers will be very interested. The color drained completely from Chloe's face at the mention of military lawyers. This wasn't small-town gossip anymore. This was the U.S. Army. Careers weren't just ruined here. They were court-martialed, stripped, and destroyed. No. The word burst from her, raw and panicked. The delicate damsel was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. She scrambled toward me on her knees, dirt staining her pristine sundress. Evie, please. You can't. It was an accident. A stupid mistake. We were just walking. With a basket? And matching canteens. I asked, my voice lethally soft. Planning a long walk, were you? Annie and her husband arrived then, panting, carrying the old wooden screen door. It created a welcome distraction. Here. We got it. The immediate physical crisis took over. Under Sergeant Mulvaney's direction, a few of the men, carefully following my terse instructions, slid the door next to Chase. With coordinated effort, they rolled him gently onto the rigid surface. He groaned, a low, pained sound, but didn't regain full consciousness. As they lifted the makeshift stretcher, his hand, limp and bloody, slipped off the side. For a split second, the old Evelyn threatened to surface. That was the hand that had held mine at the altar. That had, in rare early moments of kindness, brushed hair from my face. The ghost of a love I'd mourned for a decade twisted in my gut. Then I saw Chloe watching him, her hand fluttering to her throat, not in distress, but in possessiveness. She was already claiming him even as he was carried away. The ghost shriveled and died. That hand had also pushed me. It had signed mortgage documents for an apartment I knew nothing about. It had belonged to a stranger. Take him to Martin Army Hospital, I said, my voice back to its detached calm. Tell the triage nurse it's a possible spinal injury with a compound femoral fracture and significant blood loss from a goring wound. The men nodded, shuffling off carefully down the path with their burden. Margaret shot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred before scurrying after them, her cries of, "My boy! My boy!" fading into the trees. The crowd began to disperse, the show apparently over. But the whispers lingered, and the looks they gave Chloe, now sitting alone and crumpled in the dirt, were no longer sympathetic. They were wary, disgusted. She had been unmasked, not by a shouting match but by a single silent mushroom. I turned to walk back to the house. I had things to do. Evelyn. Chloe's voice behind me was different. The tears were gone. It was low, cold, and sharp as a shard of glass. I stopped but didn't turn. You think you're so clever, she hissed. I could almost feel her venomous gaze on my back. You humiliated me. You humiliated him. But he'll wake up. And when he does, he'll know it was you who kicked him when he was down. He'll never forgive you for this. I finally turned to face her. She had pulled herself up, brushing dirt from her dress with furious, jerky motions. The innocent facade was in tatters, revealing the spiteful core I knew all too well. Chloe, I said, and I allowed a small, genuine smile to touch my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. I don't want his forgiveness. I stopped wanting anything from Chase Carter a long, long time ago. I left her standing there, the poisonous mushroom still lying in the grass where I'd dropped it, a tiny scarlet monument to the day her game changed. The house was quiet when I returned. Eerily so. The quilt still hung on the line, absorbing the afternoon sun. The glass of sweet tea sat sweating on the kitchen table, half finished. I didn't feel like sitting. A restless, purposeful energy buzzed under my skin. The first move was made. The social narrative had been shifted. Now it was time to secure my position. I went straight to the bedroom, to the large, heavy oak dresser that had been Chase's grandfather's. On the top sat his leather-bound valet box, where he kept his important things. In my first life I'd never dared to open it. It was his private domain. Now I saw it for what it was. A treasure chest of my future. It was locked, of course. A small brass padlock. Chase thought he was so clever. He thought the meek little wife he'd molded wouldn't have the guts or the wit to go looking. I knelt on the braided rug and felt along the underside of the dresser's middle drawer. My fingers brushed against rough wood, then found it, the small piece of peeling duct tape. I peeled it back and the cold, small key fell into my palm. The lock clicked open with a satisfying snick. Inside, the order was military neat. His officer's commission. A bundle of letters tied with ribbon. I'd get to those. a .45 caliber service pistol unloaded, and a simple green passbook for the Fort Benning Federal Credit Union. I opened it. The numbers swam before my eyes for a second. Current balance, $3,417.28. $3,417. I did the math. Chase's monthly pay as a captain was about $480. He gave me a $150 allowance for groceries, utilities, and everything else to run this house. He always complained about how expensive things were, how tight money was. He'd made me feel guilty for buying a new pair of shoes last winter. And all the while he'd been salting away over $3,000. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This was the financial prison he'd kept me in. Dependent, powerless, always begging for scraps. The anger was a clean, sharp thing. It focused me. I took the passbook. I also took the thick stack of cash bound with a rubber band. Another $200 in 20s. I left the gun in the commission. Then I turned to the letters. The ribbon was pink. Tsuki. Chloe's color. My hands were perfectly steady as I untied it and unfolded the top sheet. The handwriting was loopy, girlish, laden with exaggerated curls and hearts over the eyes. My dearest Chase, it began. I saw you with her at the commissary today and it took everything in me not to scream. She doesn't look at you the way I do. She doesn't know you, not really. She's just a placeholder, a piece of furniture in your life. I'm the one who loves you. I'm the one you come alive with. Last Tuesday in the supply closet. I still feel your hands on me. I count the hours until we can be together, really together. Forever. Don't make me wait too long, my love. Your Chloe. The paper smelled of her cloying perfume. I read another and another. They were a roadmap of their affair stretching back at least 2 years. Detailed, brazen, dripping with a possessive lust. They spoke of meeting at motels in Phoenix City, of stolen afternoons, of plans for a future where I was conveniently out of the picture. One letter, dated just last month, mentioned how she wished she could cook a special dinner for me, to thank me for being so clueless. I sat on the edge of the bed. The letters fanned out around me like fallen, poisonous leaves. There was no pain. The pain had been burned out of me in that first life. There was only evidence. Cold, hard, irrefutable evidence. This was my ammunition. This and the bank book. I carefully retied the letters with their sickening pink ribbon. I placed them, the passbook and the cash, into a large leather handbag I rarely used. My running away bag, though I hadn't known it until now. The next step was survival. I couldn't rely on Chase's money lasting forever, and I sure as hell wasn't going back to being an allowance wife. I needed my own income. I needed to be untouchable. I'd always been a good cook. More than good. It was the one thing I'd done that ever earned a grunt of approval from Chase or a backhanded compliment from Margaret. The meatloaf's edible tonight was high praise. But the other officers' wives had always raved about my dishes at potlucks. My peach cobbler, my spicy pimento cheese, my bourbon-glazed ham. Food. It was a universal language on an army post. It was also a currency. An idea, sharp and clear, crystallized. I had about $220 of my money hidden in a coffee can in the pantry, the meager savings I'd scraped together from my grocery allowance over years. Combined with Chase's cash, it was my seed money. I changed out of my dusty clothes, put on a simple cotton dress, and drove my old Chevy Bel Air off-post to the Piggly Wiggly in Columbus. I moved with a focus I hadn't felt in years. I bought ingredients not for a family dinner but for a product. Large, cheap cuts of beef for slow braising. Onions, garlic, crates of deep red tomatoes. Vinegar, brown sugar, and every spice I could think of. Smoked paprika, cayenne, cumin. I bought mason jars by the case, lids and labels. I was going into the sauce business. For the next 2 days I didn't answer the phone. I didn't go to the hospital. I let the world think I was prostrate with grief or shock. Instead, I turned my kitchen into a factory. The air grew thick and hot with the smell of searing meat, caramelizing onions and simmering spices. I made a rich, deep barbecue base. I made a fiery vinegar-based hot sauce. I made a savory tomato-based, everything sauce good on meat, potatoes, eggs. I tasted and adjusted, drawing on a lifetime of Southern cooking intuition and the remembered praise of 100 potlucks. This wasn't just food, it was my independence simmering in every pot. On the third afternoon, as a batch of my Georgia Fire hot sauce was bubbling, there was a knock at my door. Not the frantic banging of before, but a timid, polite tap. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked through the curtain. It was Annie, the specialist's wife, who'd fetched the door. She looked nervous, holding a casserole dish covered in tinfoil. I opened the door. The aroma of spicy, savory goodness billowed out. "Oh wow," Annie breathed, her eyes widening. "That smells incredible." "Canning day," I said, offering a small smile. "What can I do for you, Annie?" I just wanted to check on you. And bring you this." She thrust the casserole dish forward. "Tuna noodle. I know things must be, well." She glanced past me into the steamy, fragrant kitchen. "Are you cooking for the church or something?" "Or something," I said. "Come on in. Actually, you can be my taste tester." I led her in, scooped a small spoonful of the finished Fort Benning everything sauce onto a saltine cracker and handed it to her. She ate it. Her eyes went wide, then closed in bliss. "Evelyn Carter. Where has this been all my life? This is better than my grandma's, and I never say that." A genuine warmth, the first I'd felt since my rebirth, spread through my chest. "You think others would like it? Like it? They'd fight over it. Do you know how hard it is to get good homemade food around here? We're all so busy, or we can't cook worth a darn. My Hank would slather this on his boots and eat 'em." And there was my market. Annie left 20 minutes later, not with her tuna casserole, but with 3 warm mason jars of sauce and a promise to tell her friends. She'd also given me the hospital update. Chase was out of surgery. His leg was pinned together, but he'd walk with a limp. The gash on his side required stitches but missed his organs. He had a concussion. He was awake and he was furious. "They're saying awful things about you, Evelyn," Annie whispered at the door, her face worried. "His mama and that cousin of yours. They're telling everyone you stole from him and left him for dead." I just nodded. "Let them talk, Annie. Just do me a favor. When people ask about the sauce, tell them the truth about how it tastes." She promised, a spark of understanding in her eyes. She was starting to see this wasn't a breakdown. It was a siege. I went back to my pots. Let Chase be furious. Let Margaret shriek. Let Chloe spin her tales. I had a business to build. And soon, very soon, I would have a war to win. The first battle was fought with a mushroom. The next would be fought with the truth served up cold. But for now, I'd fight with the weapon I knew best. The irresistible smell of a future I was cooking up all by myself. The scent of success, it turned out, smelled of caramelized onions, smoked paprika, and vengeance. Annie was better than any radio advertisement. By the next morning, a tentative line had formed outside my screen door. Not a crowd, but a steady trickle of curious, hungry-looking officers' wives. They came with empty jars, with Tupperware, with excuses about just checking in, that evaporated the moment the rich, spiced air hit them. I'd set up a card table on the porch. On it sat gleaming rows of mason jars, each labeled in my neatest handwriting. Evelyn's Everything Sauce, Georgia Fire Hot Sauce, Smoky Bourbon Barbecue Glaze. I'd priced them ambitiously, $2.50 a jar. It was a fortune compared to the 79-cent cans of sauce at the commissary, but this wasn't canned. This was real. Wanda, a formidable colonel's wife with a helmet of rigid blonde hair, was my first real customer after Annie. She sniffed a sample cracker piled with everything sauce, with deep suspicion, then took a tiny bite. Her eyebrows, plucked into perfect arches, shot toward her hairline. "Good Lord," she murmured. Then she took another, larger bite. "Evelyn, this is extraordinary. What's in it?" "Family secret, Wanda," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "But I promise no destroying angels." A shocked titter ran through the small gathering on the porch. The rumor mill had been grinding overtime. My line about the mushroom had become post-lore, repeated with horrified glee at every coffee clatch. It had done more than shame Chloe. It had painted me not as a victim but as someone shrewd, someone who saw things others missed. Wanda's lips tightened into something almost resembling a smile. She understood power plays. She bought 3 jars of each variety, peeling bills from a fat leather wallet without flinching. "For the bridge club," she announced as if bestowing a royal favor. Her patronage was the signal the others had been waiting for. The dam broke. Jars were snatched up, money exchanged hands. They asked hesitant questions about Chase, about the hospital. I gave polite, vague answers. He's recovering. The doctors are optimistic. I never mentioned Chloe. I didn't have to. My silence on the subject was louder than any scream. By noon my first batch was sold out. I had over $100 in cash tucked into the old coffee can. It was more disposable money than I'd held in my entire first life. The feeling was dizzying, addictive. This was mine. Earned by my own hands, my own skill. No one could take it away, no one could hold it over me. I was wiping down the card table when a shadow fell across the porch. The air didn't smell of spices anymore. It smelled of Jean Nate and desperation. Chloe stood there. She'd changed into a demure pink blouse and capri pants, her hair freshly curled. She tried to repair the facade but cracks showed. Dark circles smudged under her eyes, and her smile was a brittle, strained thing. "Evelyn," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "I've been so worried about you holed up out here all alone." The few remaining wives on neighboring porches fell silent, their ears practically twitching. "I've been busy, Chloe," I said, not stopping my cleaning. "As you can see." Her eyes darted to the empty jars, the cash box. A flicker of pure, unadulterated jealousy flashed there before she smothered it. "Selling sauce?" "No. With Chase in the hospital." I straightened and looked at her. "Somebody has to pay the bills. Unless you were planning to contribute to his medical expenses." I let the question hang. I knew from Annie that Margaret was already balking at the hospital's payment demands, screeching about how the army should cover it. Chloe blanched. That's not. Aunt Margaret asked me to come. She needs you to come to the hospital. To sign some papers. About his care. Any papers regarding Captain Carter's care can be sent to me here, or his mother can sign them," I said, my voice flat. "She's his next of kin. I'm just the wife he was with another woman when he got injured." I made sure to say it clearly for the benefit of the porch auditors. Chloe's mask slipped completely for a second. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she hissed, taking a step closer. "You love making him look bad." "Making me look bad?" I leaned in, close enough to smell the fear under her perfume. "I don't have to make you look bad, Chloe," I whispered, the words just for her. "The letters do that all by themselves." She jerked back as if slapped, her hand flying to her throat. The color drained from her face again. He knew. She knew I had them. The last vestige of her performance crumbled into raw panic. Without another word, she turned on her heel and fled, her perfect curls bouncing with the force of her retreat. I went back inside, the screen door slapping shut behind me with a sound of finality. The encounter left me energized, not drained. I was in control. That evening, as I was counting my earnings at the kitchen table, the phone rang. Its jangle was an intrusion. I let it ring 5-6 times before picking it up. "Evelyn." It was Chase. His voice was weak, raspy with pain and medication, but underneath was a tectonic plate of fury. "Where the hell have you been?" I leaned against the wall, twining the phone cord around my finger. "Hello, Chase. I heard you were awake. How's the leg?" "Don't you give me that polite crap," he snarled, the effort causing him to cough. "My mother has been here for days. Chloe has been here helping, supporting me. And you're selling condiments? And stealing from me." "Stealing." I kept my voice mild. "The bank book, Evelyn. The lockbox. You think I'm an idiot? You think I wouldn't notice?" "I took what was mine, Chase. Half of that savings is community property. Consider it an early distribution. As for the rest, call it a fee for emotional distress and wasted years." The letters were very enlightening. The silence on the other end was thick, poisoned. I could hear his labored breathing. When he spoke again, the fury was colder, more dangerous. "You listen to me. You bring that money back. You bring those letters back. You get your ass down to this hospital and act like a proper wife, or I will make your life a living hell. I'll have you charged with theft. I'll ruin you." In my first life, that tone would have turned my bones to water. Now it just sounded pathetic. A wounded bully lashing out from a hospital bed. "You're in no position to ruin anyone, Chase," I said quietly. "You're facing a medical board for the injuries sustained while, according to multiple witnesses, you were in a compromising position with a woman who is not your wife, in a restricted training area. The adultery alone could end your career. The fact that you were possibly foraging for poisonous mushrooms adds a rather peculiar and potentially criminal layer of negligence." I was making some of it up, but he didn't know that. The seed of doubt was enough. You think the JAG office is going to care about a few $100s missing from a joint account when they have that to untangle? You bitch. The words were a strangled whisper. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said and hung up the phone. The click was the most satisfying sound I'd heard all day. The next week was a whirlwind. My sauce business exploded. I hired Annie part-time to help with jarring and labeling. We set up a more professional stand at the weekly Fort Benning Farmers Market, and I sold out within 2 hours. Orders started coming in from the officers' club. Even the general's wife wanted a case for a luncheon. I became that sauce lady, a minor post-celebrity. My story, the whispered version of it, only fueled interest. I was the wronged wife who wasn't weeping in a corner, but fighting back with spicy tomato goodness. It was a narrative people could get behind. I used a portion of the profits to retain a lawyer. Not a sleepy local, but a sharp, middle-aged woman from Atlanta named Sharon Price, who specialized in military divorce and had a reputation for being a pit bull. I brought the pink ribbon letters to our first meeting. Sharon read them in her sleek, air-conditioned office, her expression unchanging. When she finished, she looked up at me over her reading glasses. Well, Mrs. Carter, this is about as damning as it gets. We have adultery, we have intent, we have a clear pattern of deception. And the financial sequestration, him hiding assets while keeping you on an allowance, is another powerful point. What do you want? I want out, I said. Cleanly and completely. The house on post is assigned to him, but I want a cash settlement equivalent to my share of its value. I want half of all savings and investments traced from the day we were married. I want spousal support for 2 years while I establish my business. And I want a formal public statement from him admitting to adultery, to clear my name. Sharon nodded, making notes. Ambitious. He'll fight the support and the statement. The admission could kill his career. I know, I said. That's the point. A small, grim smile touched her lips. I think we can get most of it. The letters are the nuclear option. We'll start by demanding it all. He'll be desperate to keep those letters out of an official proceeding. She drafted the papers. The divorce petition cited adultery, cruel treatment, and constructive abandonment. The financial demands were staggering. I signed them with a steady hand. 2 days later, I was summoned to the hospital. Not by Chase, but by a captain from the JAG office and a stern-looking man in civilian clothes from Army Community Service. It was an informal mediation. Chase was propped up in his bed, his leg in a massive cast suspended in traction. He looked thinner, older, his handsome face drawn and sallow. Margaret sat in a chair by the window, glowering at me like I was a cockroach. Chloe was notably absent. The JAG officer, Captain Lewis, cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, we're here to see if we can resolve this unfortunate situation without the need for a messy public hearing. Captain Carter's career, his health, it's a lot to contend with. She's what he has to contend with. Margaret spat. She's a thief and a liar. Margaret, please, Chase said, his voice weary. He looked at me and for a second I saw the man I'd married. Charming, confident, sure of his own power. He was trying to turn it on now, a weakened version of his old spell. Evelyn, this has gotten out of hand. Let's talk. Just us. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, Chase, I said, placing my purse on the foot of his bed. My lawyer sent the petition. You know what I want. His jaw tightened. What you want is ridiculous. You want to bankrupt me, humiliate me, destroy everything I've worked for. You did that yourself, I said calmly. On the ridge with Chloe. In the letters. I pulled the stack from my purse. The pink ribbon seemed to glow in the sterile room. Captain Lewis stiffened. The ACS man leaned forward. Chase's eyes locked on the letters. All the color left his face. You wouldn't. Captain Lewis, I said, turning to the JAG officer. These are love letters from Miss Chloe Simmons to my husband, detailing their adulterous relationship over the last 2 years. They include references to meetings on post in violation of regulations, and discussions about their future together after removing me from the picture. I believe they are relevant to both the divorce proceedings and any potential conduct unbecoming inquiry. Give me those. Chase lunged forward, a clumsy, painful movement. His forepole wobbled. Captain Carter. Captain Lewis barked. He took the letters from my hand, his face grave. He scanned a page, then another. His expression turned from professional neutrality to cold disgust. He looked at Chase. "Is this your handwriting, Miss Simmons's?" He held up a page with a loopy heart. Chase sank back into his pillows, defeated. He didn't need to answer. His silence was confession enough. Margaret began to cry, real tears this time, of shame and shattered illusion. "My boy. Oh, my boy, what did you do?" The meeting was over. The facts were now in the hands of the army. Chase's bargaining power had evaporated. Captain Lewis handed the letters back to me, carefully as if they were contaminated. "Mrs. Carter, I think it would be best if you and your attorney dealt directly with Captain Carter's chain of command regarding the divorce. The extracurricular matters indicated here will be dealt with through separate channels." The way he said it promised nothing good for Chase. I stood to leave. Chase's voice stopped me at the door, stripped of all pretense, raw with a hatred that mirrored my own from another life. "You'll regret this, Evelyn. I swear to God you'll regret this." I looked back at him, the broken golden boy in his hospital bed, his mother weeping, his career in tatters, his mistress in hiding. The storm inside me, the one that had raged for a decade, finally stilled. The ice melted, not into warmth, but into a vast, empty plain of peace. "No, Chase," I said, my voice clear in the quiet room. "I already did my regretting. A long time ago." I walked out, the click of my heels on the linoleum the only sound. The war wasn't over, but the decisive battle was won. The rest was just paperwork. And I had a business to run. I had a new life to build. One jar of sauce, one signed paper, one free breath at a time. The heat outside was still brutal, but it felt different now. It felt like a forge. And I was finally being tempered into something strong enough to survive. The silence after my exit from the hospital room was a tangible thing, thick with ruin and recrimination. I didn't hear it. I was already miles away, my mind on balance sheets and spice ratios. The emotional gauntlet was over. Now came the administrative slog of dismantling a life. Sharon Price was worth every penny of her retainer. She moved with the brutal efficiency of a surgeon. Within a week of the hospital meeting, Chase's commanding officer, Colonel Briggs, summoned us to his office. The colonel was a man who looked like he'd been carved from a single block of Appalachian oak, with a flat-top haircut and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't offer coffee. He had my divorce petition and a separate JAG memo on his desk, side by side. He looked at Chase, who was on crutches, his face pale and sweaty with the effort of standing at a semblance of attention. "Captain Carter," Colonel Briggs began, his voice devoid of inflection. "This is a disgrace. A professional and personal failure of the highest order. You have embarrassed this command, violated the sanctity of your marriage, a marriage the Army recognizes and expects you to uphold, and compromised your own fitness for duty through reckless personal conduct." He tapped the JAG memo. "The preliminary inquiry into your actions on the Ridge, coupled with the A correspondence, leaves little room for doubt. You are facing a field-grade Article 15 at a minimum. Your promotion to major is suspended indefinitely." Each word was a hammer blow. Chase swayed on his crutches. Margaret, who had insisted on coming, let out a small, choked sob but was silenced by a single icy glance from the colonel. Briggs then turned to me. His gaze was different, not warm but assessing. "Mrs. Carter, you have my apologies for the conduct of one of my officers. It reflects poorly on all of us. I understand you wish for a swift resolution." "I do, Colonel," I said, my voice steady. Sharon sat beside me, a silent pillar of competence. "The Army prefers to handle these matters internally with discretion," he continued. "A protracted public divorce hearing benefits no one. Captain Carter has indicated a willingness to agree to your terms, provided that more sensitive evidence remains out of any official record that could lead to a court-martial." It was the deal. His career, what was left of it, in exchange for my financial and personal freedom. Chase's head was bowed, the picture of abject humiliation. It was a pose I knew. The fury was still there, banked and burning. But he was out of options. "My client agrees to that condition," Sharon said smoothly. "Provided the terms of the settlement are met in full and without delay." The terms were read aloud. Half of all marital assets, to be determined by a full accounting. A cash settlement in lieu of the post housing. 2 years of spousal support at a rate that made Chase flinch. and a written statement to be signed by him and approved by me, acknowledging his infidelity as the cause of the marriage's dissolution. The statement, Chase rasped, finally looking up. His eyes were bloodshot. Do you have to broadcast it? It will be filed with the divorce decree, which is a public document, Sharon said. And my client reserves the right to share it discreetly to correct any defamatory rumors circulating about her character. We wouldn't want the Post to think she was the one who abandoned her wounded husband, would we? It was masterful. He would have to publicly confess or risk me releasing the letters, which were infinitely worse. He was trapped. I agree, he said, the words dragged from him. Wise choice, Captain, Colonel Briggs said, a clear dismissal in his tone. Your lawyer and Mrs. Price will handle the details. You are dismissed. I suggest you focus on your physical recovery and consider your future in this man's army. It is now a very limited one. We filed out. In the hallway, Margaret turned on me, her face a rictus of hate. You vindictive little witch. You've broken him. Are you happy now? I looked at her, this woman who had spent years belittling me. No, Margaret, I said honestly. Happy is too strong a word. Finished. That's all. I left them there, a broken son and his harpy mother, and walked into the bright Georgia sun with Sharon. Start the forensic accounting, I told her. Track every dollar. I want it all. While Sharon waged paper warfare, I built my empire one mason jar at a time. Evelyn's Essentials became a legitimate business. I rented a small, certified commercial kitchen space in a strip mall just outside the Post gates. Annie came on full-time, her husband having gotten orders to Germany. She was devastated to leave, but I sent her off with a case of sauce and a bonus that made her cry. I hired 2 other army wives, Linda and Rosa, who needed flexible, decent-paying work. We developed new products. A pepper jelly that made your tongue sing, a dry rub for grilling that smelled like heaven, a line of pickled vegetables. We sold at farmers markets across Columbus, supplied 3 local diners, and even got a small, nerve-wracking order from a boutique grocery store in Atlanta. The work was exhausting, all-consuming. I spent my days up to my elbows in tomatoes and vinegar, my nights doing invoices and inventory. I loved it. The fatigue was honest. The profit was mine. Every jar sold was a brick in the wall I was building between me and my past. The divorce proceedings were a slow, grinding process. Chase and his lawyer fought over every penny, dragged their feet on the asset disclosure. Sharon was a bulldog, subpoenaing bank records, challenging his valuation of a vintage car he'd bought as an investment without my knowledge. The spousal support was particularly bitter. He argued that my thriving business meant I didn't need it. His adultery is the reason you have this business, Sharon countered in court. Her economic situation is a direct result of his betrayal and financial control. The support is not just warranted, it is restitution. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp gaze, agreed. Throughout it all, I avoided Chase in his world. I heard snippets though. He'd been reassigned to a desk job in the logistics command, a dead end for an infantry officer. The limp was permanent. The once vibrant, charismatic captain was now a scowling, isolated figure, his career trajectory flatlined. Chloe, I heard from Linda, whose friend knew a nurse, had left town abruptly. The scandal had gotten too hot, the side-piece life not so glamorous when the man was broken and penniless. Rumor had it she'd gone back to our hometown in Tennessee, her tail between her legs. Good. The final hearing was anticlimactic. A civilian courtroom in Columbus. Chase sat with his lawyer, refusing to look at me. I sat with Sharon, a folder of finalized documents before me. The judge reviewed the settlement. A lump sum payment of $25,000, my share of assets and the housing settlement, the 2 years of support and the formal, signed confession. Captain Carter, the judge said. You understand this statement will be part of the permanent record? Yes, Your Honor, he muttered. And you sign it voluntarily, acknowledging its truth? A long, strained pause. Yes, Your Honor. He signed. I signed. The judge stamped the decree with a final, echoing thud. It was over. With that stamp, 10 years of my life were legally erased, summarized in terms of dollars and cents in a statement of infidelity. We walked out of the courthouse into a crisp autumn day. Chase moved ahead on his crutches, his mother waiting for him at the bottom of the steps. He didn't look back. Sharon shook my hand. It's done. The money will be wired within 30 days. Congratulations, Evelyn. You're free. Free. The word felt too big, too light. I got into my car, now a reliable used station wagon I'd bought with sauce profits, and just sat for a moment. I expected to feel something huge. Triumph, elation, grief. Instead, I felt a profound, quiet emptiness. A clean slate. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I drove not to the commercial kitchen but to the quiet, empty post house. My time there was limited. I had 30 days to vacate. I walked through the rooms, now just spaces. The living room where I'd spent lonely nights. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, first with hope, then with duty, finally with defiance. The bedroom that held only ghosts. I didn't pack memories. I packed efficiently, coldly. I hired movers for the furniture I wanted to keep. A few good pieces from my grandmother. The rest, the stuff Chase and I had bought together, I sold in a yard sale. Wanda from the bridge club bought the hideous china service Margaret had given us. It felt poetic. On my last day, I stood in the middle of the bare living room, the keys in my hand. The walls echoed. I had survived this place. I had outlasted it. I locked the door for the final time and dropped the keys in the housing office mailbox without a backward glance. My new life had a new address. A small, sunny two-bedroom apartment in a nice part of Columbus. One bedroom for me, one for my office/stockroom. It was mine. My name on the lease. My sauces lining the shelves. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. I poured my energy into the business. With the divorce settlement as capital, I invested. Better packaging. A small local advertising campaign. Evelyn's Essentials. Taste of Independence. The tagline read. It was cheeky and it worked. 6 months after the divorce, I was approached by a regional food distributor. They wanted to carry my line in 50 grocery stores across Georgia and Alabama. It was the break I'd been dreaming of. I signed the contract, my hand only trembling a little. I hired a part-time bookkeeper. I was, by any reasonable measure, a success. One afternoon, while finalizing the production schedule for the big distributor order, my bookkeeper, a meticulous older woman named Beatrice, looked up from her ledger. Evelyn, there's a person asking for you at the kitchen door. He says it's personal. He looks unwell. A cold trickle of dread, an old, familiar ghost, touched my spine. Did he give a name? Carter. Chase Carter. I hadn't seen him since the courthouse steps. I considered telling Beatrice to send him away. But curiosity and a deep-seated need to see the final proof of my victory won out. I'll see him. In the alley. Not inside. I walked out the back door of the kitchen into the service alley. The air was greasy with the smell of dumpsters and, faintly, of simmering tomatoes. He was leaning against a brick wall, out of uniform. He wore ill-fitting civilian clothes, cheap khakis and a polo shirt. He'd lost more weight. The crutches were gone, but he walked with a pronounced jerking limp. His hair, once so carefully groomed, was thinning, unkempt. He looked a decade older. Evelyn. His voice was rough, used too much on cheap whiskey if I had to guess. Chase. I crossed my arms, leaning against the door jamb. This is a place of business. What do you want? He looked around the alley at the bustling kitchen door, his expression one of profound disorientation. I heard you're doing well. The sauce thing. I am. He nodded, swallowing hard. He couldn't meet my eyes. I got my discharge. Medical. They're calling it an early retirement. He tried to say it with dignity, but it came out as a confession of failure. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was, in the abstract way you're sorry to hear about a distant acquaintance's misfortune. There was no satisfaction in seeing him like this, just a distant clinical observation. The mighty fallen. Margaret's sick, he blurted out, finally looking at me. His eyes were desperate. High blood pressure. The stress, the doctor says. The medical bills. My pension isn't much, and with the settlement, he trailed off, the ask hanging in the foul air. But there was not a reconciliation, not an apology. A shakedown. The audacity was almost impressive. That's unfortunate, I said, my voice cooling further. But it's not my concern. Our financial obligations were settled in court. Legally, finally. You have money now, he hissed, the desperation turning to familiar anger. You're rolling in it. From my money. It was our money. I corrected, my tone icy. And I built what I have from a $150 grocery allowance and a lot of hard work. You have no claim to it. Not a single cent. He took a hobbling step forward, his face twisting. You owe me. You ruined me. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground. You ruined yourself, Chase. On that ridge. In those letters. Every choice was yours. I just stopped cleaning up the mess. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once. The anger collapsed into a hollow, broken exhaustion. He looked like what he was. A middle-aged man with a limp and no future, standing in a hot alley begging from the wife he'd betrayed. Just alone, Evelyn. Please. For my mother. No, the word was absolute. Goodbye, Chase. I turned and went back inside, closing the heavy steel door behind me. I engaged the deadbolt with a solid, resonant clunk. I stood there for a moment, listening. I heard nothing. No pounding, no shouts. Just the hum of the industrial refrigerators and the distant clatter of pots from my kitchen. When I looked out the peephole minutes later, the alley was empty. He was gone. Beatrice looked at me with worried eyes. Everything all right, dear? I took a deep breath, inhaling the rich, familiar sense of my kingdom, garlic, vinegar, success. I smiled, and for the first time in a very, very long time, it reached my eyes. Everything, I said, is perfect. The deadbolt's clunk was the period at the end of a very long, very ugly sentence. Chase was gone, and with him the last lingering ghost of my old life. I felt no guilt. The well of sympathy for that man had been drained dry a lifetime ago in a hospital room where I'd lost my child. The encounter should have shaken me. Instead, it solidified something. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And my success was the one thing my past couldn't touch, couldn't tarnish, couldn't take away. I doubled down on Evelyn's essentials. The distributor deal was a game changer. My sauces, pickles, and jellies now sat on shelves from Savannah to Mobile. The income was no longer just good for a side hustle. It was serious, life-altering money. I moved out of the apartment and bought a small, neat ranch house on the outskirts of Columbus. With a detached garage I immediately converted into a professional-grade production kitchen. My team grew. Linda and Rosa were now shift supervisors. I hired a marketing graduate from Columbus State, a whip-smart young woman named Kelsey who saw the potential for a lifestyle brand. It's not just sauce, Evelyn, she said, her eyes bright with ideas. It's a story. Southern resilience. Homemade goodness. Female entrepreneurship. She got me on local talk radio in the food section of the Atlanta paper. We started a mail-order business that brought in customers from New York to California. I was, by all accounts, a local success story. The sauce queen of Columbus. The narrative of the wronged army wife who turned heartbreak into hot sauce was too good for the media to resist. I leaned into it carefully. I never named names, never gave specifics. I talked about rebuilding, finding my own strength. The healing power of good food. It was true in its way. And it sold jars. Lots of them. A year after the divorce, I was invited to be a vendor at the Atlanta Food and Wine Festival. It was a huge deal, a chance to get in front of buyers from high-end gourmet stores and national chains. I was packing my display crates, new elegant glass jars with minimalist labels Kelsey had designed, when my phone rang. The number had a Tennessee area code. A cold prickle went down my spine. I almost didn't answer. But a lifetime of caution, of anticipating the next blow, made me pick up. Hello. Evie? It's Chloe. Her voice was thin, reedy. It lacked the calculated sweetness, the practiced tremor. It just sounded tired and scared. I didn't speak. I let the silence stretch, heavy and accusing. I know you don't want to hear from me, she rushed on. And I don't blame you. I'm in trouble, Evie. Real trouble. I walked into my living room away from the bustle of the garage. What kind of trouble, Chloe? It's Mama Simmons, she said, referring to our aunt, her mother and my mother's sister. She had a stroke. A bad one. She's in the hospital in Chattanooga. The bills. She started to cry, real ragged sobs that held none of her old theatrical flair. I've been waitressing, but it's not enough. I don't have anyone else to ask. I closed my eyes. Aunt Carol. She was a kind woman, if flighty, who had always been a little too charmed by her daughter's manipulative ways. She didn't deserve to suffer because of the viper she'd raised. This isn't my problem, Chloe. I said, but my voice lacked its usual steel. Please, she whispered. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for her. You remember how she used to make us those peach pies? How she took you in that summer when your daddy was sick? He loved you, Evie. She really did. She was playing the one card she had left. Genuine, uncomplicated decency. And it worked. I did remember. I remembered Aunt Carol's warm kitchen, the smell of cinnamon, a safe haven during a chaotic childhood. I remembered her hugging me at my mother's funeral, her tears dampening my hair. I'll have my bookkeeper wire a sum to the hospital's billing department, I said, my tone all business. Directly to them. For Aunt Carol's care only. It will be a one-time gift. Not a loan. You will not contact me again to thank me or ask for more. Do you understand? The relief on the other end was palpable. Yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you, Evie. God bless you. I hung up. I stood there for a long moment, my hand shaking slightly. It was the right thing to do. But it also felt like opening a door I'd sworn was sealed forever. I pushed the feeling down. Aunt Carol was the past worth saving. Chloe was just the delivery system. I had Beatrice send $5,000 to the Chattanooga General Hospital, designated for Carol Simmons's account. Then I packed my car and drove to Atlanta, pushing the entire incident from my mind. I had a festival to conquer. The Atlanta Food and Wine Festival was a sensory overload. Tents full of artisanal cheeses, small batch bourbons, organic chocolates. The air hummed with money and ambition. My booth, Evelyn's Essentials, was modest but well-placed. Kelsey had done a fantastic job with the branding, clean, modern, but with a hand-drawn peach motif that whispered Southern without screaming it. I spent 2 days on my feet, offering samples on little crackers, shaking hands, telling my carefully curated story. My Georgia Fire hot sauce was a hit. A buyer from a high-end grocery chain in Texas took 6 cases on the spot. A food blogger with 500,000 Instagram followers did a live taste test that made her fan herself dramatically. Y'all, this sauce has a story and a kick, she crowed to her phone. I sold out of everything I'd brought. On the final afternoon, exhausted but buzzing with triumph, I decided to treat myself to a walk through the festival to see my competition. I was sampling a sublime pimento cheese when I felt a gaze on me. I turned. Across the aisle at a booth for a sleek, corporate-looking artisanal condiment company, stood a man in a crisp chef's coat. He was tall, with dark hair silvering at the temples and the focused, intelligent eyes of a scientist. He was watching me, not my booth but me, with a quiet, unnerving intensity. I looked away, discomfited. A few minutes later, as I was packing up my now empty display, he appeared at the edge of my tent. Evelyn Carter? His voice was a low baritone, smooth as good whiskey. That's me. Daniel Sterling, he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, dry. I've been sampling your wares all weekend. Incognito, of course. The Georgia Fire, in particular, is a masterpiece of balanced heat. The smoked paprika undertone is inspired. Thank you, I said, wary. Flattery from competitors was usually a prelude to a knife in the back. I'm not a competitor, he said, as if reading my mind. A faint smile touched his lips. Or I wasn't. I'm a food chemist. I consult for several large manufacturers, but my passion is small-batch, quality-driven producers like yourself. I also, he added, his gaze sharpening, read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution piece on you last month. The story is compelling, but the product is what truly stands out. What are you saying, Mr. Sterling? I'm saying I think you're at a crossroads. You can stay regional, be a big fish in a medium-sized pond. Or, he paused, you can scale. Properly. Without losing the soul of what you make. I have contacts. Investors who are interested in authentic stories with proven market success. I think Evelyn's Essentials could be a national brand. The world seemed to tilt. National brand. It was everything I'd dreamed of but hadn't dared to voice. It was also terrifying. Losing control. Becoming part of a machine. It's something to consider, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'm content with my growth for now. Contentment is the enemy of greatness, he replied, but it didn't sound like a cheesy platitude coming from him. Sounded like a fact. He handed me a simple, elegant business card. No pressure. If you're ready to have a conversation about the next level, call me. I can help you navigate it without selling out. He gave a slight nod and melted back into the crowd. I stared at the card. Daniel Sterling, PhD. Sterling Food Labs and Consultancy. It felt like a key had been dropped in my lap. To what, I wasn't sure. Back in Columbus, life resumed its new, satisfying rhythm. The festival orders kept us busy for months. The Texas chain reordered, then a group of stores in Florida. I hired 2 more full-time employees. My little garage operation was straining at the seams. Daniel Sterling's card sat on my desk, a persistent, gleaming white rectangle. I researched him. His credentials were impeccable. MIT years at a major spice company before going independent. He was known for helping small producers go big while maintaining quality. His reputation was solid. Part of me, the old Evelyn, screamed to leave well enough alone. I had security. I had respect. I was safe. But the woman I had forged in the fire of betrayal, the one who had stared down Chase in an alley, wanted more. Not just more money but more impact. To prove, on the largest stage possible, that I was more than what had been done to me. I called him. A week later he was in my converted garage kitchen, wearing jeans and a simple button-down, tasting a new batch of pepper jelly directly from the pot with a small spoon. He closed his eyes, concentrating. "Blackberry base," he murmured. "A hint of ginger. And, is that a touch of cardamom?" I was stunned. "Yes." He opened his eyes, smiling. "It's exceptional. Unique. This is what I'm talking about, Evelyn. You have an instinct. We can industrialize the process without industrializing the taste. We can build a facility. Source ingredients directly from Georgia farms. Tell that story too local, sustainable." We talked for hours. He was sharp, direct, but he listened. He didn't try to charm me, he engaged my intellect. He treated my business like the serious enterprise it was. For the first time since Annie, I felt like I had a partner. A purely professional one, but a partner nonetheless. Over the next few months, with Daniel's guidance, I secured venture capital. It was a nerve-wracking process, giving up a percentage of my company, my baby. But Daniel negotiated terms that left me with majority control and final say on all product decisions. We broke ground on a small processing plant on the outskirts of town. The press loved it. From heartbreak to hot sauce, local entrepreneur breaks ground on new facility. There was a photo of me in a hard hat, smiling, holding a gold-painted shovel. I looked confident. I looked like a CEO. The night of the groundbreaking ceremony, I treated my entire team to dinner at the nicest steakhouse in Columbus. We were a noisy, happy group, toasting with sweet tea and local beer. As we were leaving, Daniel, who had become a trusted advisor and surprisingly easy friend, held the door for me. "You've built something remarkable, Evelyn," he said as we walked into the warm night. "We've built," I corrected. He shook his head. "The vision was always yours. I just helped with the blueprints." He paused, his expression turning serious. "There's something I need to tell you. I did some deeper due diligence when we were courting investors. On your ex-husband." A chill ran through me despite the heat. "Why?" "Standard practice. To ensure no potential liabilities. Thought you should know. He was denied a loan at 3 banks in town. His mother's medical debts are significant. He's working as a night security guard at the Peachtree Plaza Hotel in Atlanta. It's not going well for him." I absorbed the information. The Peachtree Plaza. It was one of the older grand hotels, now slightly faded. I pictured Chase in a cheap security blazer, limping through marble halls he could no longer afford to stay in. The image should have brought triumph. It only brought a hollow echo. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice quiet. "But he's not a liability. He's a stranger." Daniel studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Good." As I drove home to my quiet, beautiful house, I thought about Chase in that hotel. I thought about the $5,000 I'd sent to Chattanooga. I thought about the gleaming new steel of my soon-to-be factory. The scales were not balanced. They could never be balanced for the loss of a child, the theft of a decade. But they had tipped irrevocably. My life was a rising line on a graph. His was a fading blip. The past was a country I had emigrated from. I had new citizenship now in a land of my own making. And for the first time I finally believed the border was closed for good. The only thing left was to see how high I could build in this new world. The view, I decided, was going to be spectacular. The hum of the new facility was a different kind of music. It was the low thrum of industrial refrigeration, the rhythmic chug-chug-chug of the filling machine, the hiss of the steam kettle. It was the sound of scale, of dreams made manifest in stainless steel and state-of-the-art food safety protocols. Evelyn's Essentials was no longer a garage operation. It was a small but formidable empire, housed in 10,000 square feet of pristine climate-controlled space. Daniel Sterling had been as good as his word. The new recipes, scaled for production, retained the soul of my originals. The Georgia Fire hot sauce that rolled off the line had the same complex, smoky kick as the batch I'd simmered on my old stove. It just came in bottles by the thousand now. We landed our first national contract, a mid-sized, quality-focused grocery chain with stores across the Southeast. The initial order was for 20,000 units across 5 product lines. When the purchase order appeared in my email, I printed it out and stared at the numbers until they blurred. This was real. This was the next level. My life was a whirlwind of production schedules, quality control checks, and marketing meetings. Kelsey, now my director of marketing, was planning a digital campaign that involved food trucks and influencer partnerships. I had an office with a door that closed and a view of the loading dock, which I loved more than any ocean vista. I was busy, purposefully so. The work left no room for ghosts. Or so I thought. The invitation came on heavy, cream-colored stock. The Georgia Business Leaders Awards, celebrating innovation and enterprise. I was a finalist for Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year. The ceremony was a black tie gala at the very same Peachtree Plaza Hotel in Atlanta. The irony was not lost on me. Daniel, who was also attending as my guest and nominator, raised an eyebrow when I told him the venue. "You don't have to go," he said simply over coffee in my office. "Yes, I do," I replied, my voice firm. I'd spent too long hiding, shrinking. I would not hide from a hotel. Besides, it's the best chicken piccata in the city. Or so I'm told. The night of the gala, I stood before the full-length mirror in my bedroom. The dress was a departure from my usual practical skirts and blouses. It was a deep emerald green, simple in cut but exquisite in fabric, falling in a clean line to the floor. It was elegant, confident. It felt like armor. My hair, which I usually kept in a sensible twist, was styled into soft waves. I looked like the CEO I was. I looked like a woman who had left heartbreak in the dust. Daniel, looking sharp in a tuxedo, met me in the lobby of my building. He let out a low whistle. "Evelyn, you look formidable." "Good," I said, taking his offered arm. "That's the point." The Peachtree Plaza was a monument to a gilded age, all crystal chandeliers, gilt mirrors, and acres of red velvet. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns, the air buzzing with champagne-fueled deal-making and self-congratulation. We were seated at a table near the front. I recognized a few faces from the business pages, nodded politely. The awards ceremony dragged on through salads and entrees. When they announced my category, a strange calm settled over me. The host read a brief bio. From humble beginnings, building a beloved local brand into a regional powerhouse with a commitment to quality and community. They called the other finalists names. Then, and the winner is Evelyn Carter of Evelyn's Essentials. The applause was a wave. Flashbulbs popped. Daniel squeezed my hand briefly under the table. "Go get it." I rose, smoothed my dress, and walked to the stage. The steps were solid under my heels. The spotlight was warm, blinding. I accepted the heavy crystal award from the presenter, a silver-haired banking magnate. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice clear and steady in the hushed room. "This award isn't just for me. It's for every person on my team who believed in a crazy idea, that the best revenge is living well and that living well tastes a little spicy." A polite, knowing laugh rippled through the crowd. It's for every small producer who fights to keep the soul in their food. And it's a reminder that sometimes, the most essential ingredient isn't in the recipe. It's resilience. "Thank you." The applause was louder this time. I saw Daniel clapping, a genuine smile on his face. I saw Kelsey, who'd come as my guest, wiping a tear. As I descended the stage, award in hand, I felt a profound sense of closure. This was the pinnacle. The definitive answer to every slight, every betrayal. I had arrived. The rest of the evening was a blur of handshakes, business cards, and congratulations. I excused myself to visit the ladies' room, needing a moment of quiet. The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter, lit by sconces. The carpet was plush and silent underfoot. As I turned a corner toward the restrooms, I saw him. He was standing at his post beside a service elevator, a figure so diminished I almost didn't recognize him. The ill-fitting security blazer hung off his shoulders. His hair, now more gray than brown, was sparse. He leaned slightly on his bad leg, his posture defeated. He was looking down at a clipboard, his face etched with lines of perpetual fatigue. Chase. He must have felt my gaze. He looked up. For a long, suspended moment, we stared at each other across 20 feet of opulent hallway. I saw the shock in his eyes, followed by a rapid, painful sequence of emotions. Disbelief, a flicker of old anger, then a dawning, humiliating comprehension as he took in the emerald gown, the award in my hand, the diamond studs in my ears, the entire, undeniable picture of my success. I saw him see me. Truly see me for the first time since that day in the backyard. Not as his wife, not as an obstacle, but as a separate, formidable entity who had flourished in the soil of his ruin. His jaw worked. He straightened his spine with a visible effort, trying to summon some ghost of his old authority. It was a pathetic gesture, like a shivering man puffing out his chest against a blizzard. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply looked at him, my expression one of calm, detached recognition. The hatred was gone. The anger was ash. There was nothing left in me for him, not even pity. He was a relic, a museum exhibit labeled, "Past Mistakes." I gave the slightest, most imperceptible of nods. An acknowledgement that I saw him, that this moment was happening. Then, without breaking my stride, I turned and pushed through the door to the ladies' lounge. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. In the mirror, beneath the flattering light, my face was serene. The encounter had been a confirmation, not a confrontation. He was the past. I was the future, holding a crystal award. When I emerged, he was gone from his post. I didn't look for him. I found Daniel near the bar. "Ready to go?" I asked. "I believe I've had enough chicken piccata for a lifetime." He searched my face, saw the piece there, and nodded. "Let's get out of here." The weeks that followed the gala were the most productive of my life. The award brought a new level of credibility. We secured distribution in the Mid-Atlantic states. A national cooking magazine featured my "Everything Sauce" in a spread about pantry powerhouses. The business was a well-oiled machine, and I was learning to be its conductor, not just its engine. Daniel and I had settled into an easy, deeply respectful partnership. He was my sounding board, my strategic foil. Over time, the professional respect had warmed into a genuine, cautious friendship. He was the first man since my rebirth I didn't feel the need to shield myself from. He asked for nothing but my honest opinion on capsaicin levels and supply chain logistics. One evening, months after the gala, we were working late in my office, hashing out a proposal for a co-packing deal that would free up our facility for new product development. "You're quiet tonight," Daniel observed, looking up from his laptop. "Just thinking," I said, staring out at the darkening parking lot. "About how far a person can come. About how the things that break you can also be the things that define you, if you let them define your strength, not your weakness." He closed his laptop. "Chase," he said, not a question. I nodded. Seeing him that night, it was like seeing a photograph of a place I used to live. The furniture is familiar, but I don't remember what it felt like to be inside those walls. There's no connection anymore. That, Daniel said quietly, is the truest form of moving on. Not hatred. Not even forgiveness, necessarily. Just irrelevance. The word was perfect. Irrelevance. Chase and his choices, Margaret's bitterness, Chloe's scheming, they were irrelevant to the woman I had become. "I have a proposition," Daniel said after a moment, his tone shifting to something more businesslike, though a new tension hummed beneath it. "I'm listening." "It's not about the business." "Not directly." He took a breath, a rare show of uncertainty from him. "I've watched you build this from the ground up. I've seen your intelligence, your grit, your integrity. I respect you more than anyone I've ever worked with. And somewhere along the way that respect has deepened." He paused, meeting my gaze squarely. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it. Because you deserve to know that you are seen, Evelyn. Not as a story of survival, but as a remarkable woman, full stop." The office was very quiet. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to fade away. I looked at Daniel, His intelligent eyes, the steady hands that understood the science of my art, the quiet strength that had propped up my ambition without ever trying to own it. For years my heart had been a vault, its contents either stolen or turned to stone. I had believed it was permanently sealed. But in that moment, listening to this good solid man speak with such careful honesty, I felt not a wrenching open but a gentle internal click. Like a well-made lock yielding to the right key. I didn't rush into his arms. I didn't make any declarations. The old Evelyn might have. The reborn Evelyn moved with deliberation. "Thank you, Daniel," I said, my voice soft but clear. "For seeing me. And for saying it." I allowed a small real smile to touch my lips. "I think I'd like to explore that deepening. Fully. Over a dinner that isn't about supply chain logistics." The smile that broke across his face was brighter than any stage spotlight. "I would like that very much." A year later, on a perfect spring day, I stood on the back porch of my house, now expanded and renovated. Below, on the lawn stretching down to the creek, a small crowd mingled. My team from the plant was there, laughing with Kelsey and her new husband. Annie had flown in from Germany, her kids chasing fireflies. Sharon Price, my attorney, was sipping sweet tea with Beatrice, the bookkeeper. It was a party to celebrate the launch of our newest line, Preserves from the Porch, a series of small batch jams and conserves made with fruit from local Georgia farms. But it felt like more. It felt like a celebration of the life I'd built, brick by brick, jar by jar. Daniel was by the grill, expertly flipping burgers, deep in conversation with the farmer who grew my peaches. He caught my eye and winked. We were taking it slow as promised. It was a partnership that had seamlessly expanded from the boardroom to my heart, built on a foundation of mutual respect that felt unshakable. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in peach and violet, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Linda. "Phone call for you, boss. In the house. Says it's important." Puzzled, I went inside to my home office. "Hello. Evelyn Carter?" It was a man's voice, unfamiliar, officious. "Yes. This is Sergeant Alvarez, Chattanooga PD. I'm calling about a Chloe Simmons. We have her listed as your next of kin." The old, cold trickle returned. "What about her?" "There's been an accident. A single-car collision on I-75. She didn't make it. We found your contact information among her things. I'm sorry for your loss." I sank into my desk chair. "Chloe, dead." The news landed with a dull, distant thud. There was no grief. Just a surreal sense of an orbit finally decaying. The last loose thread from that old, terrible tapestry snipped. "Was there anyone else?" I asked, thinking of Aunt Carol. "Her mother passed last year, I understand." "There's no one else listed. We'll need instructions regarding the remains." I gave him the name of a funeral home in Chattanooga. I would pay for the simplest cremation. A final, quiet severance. I hung up the phone and sat in the gathering dark for a few minutes, listening to the laughter from outside. Chloe was gone. Chase was a ghost in a security blazer. Margaret was a bitter memory. The people who had defined my first life were vanishing, one by one, leaving only me and the world I had created. I stood up, straightened my dress, and walked back out onto the porch. The party lights had come on, strung through the trees like captured stars. Daniel looked over, his expression shifting to one of concern as he saw my face. He started toward me. I met him halfway on the lawn. The music from the speakers was a soft, upbeat blues. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. I looked around at my friends, my team, my beautiful home, the lights of my factory visible in the distance across the fields. I looked at this good man beside me, his presence a steady warmth. I took his hand. It was solid, real. "Everything," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being, "is finally, completely okay." The past was a closed book. The future was a blank page, smelling of peaches and promise. And I, Evelyn Carter, was no longer a woman who had been reborn out of hatred. I was simply a woman, alive, free, and finally, gloriously, home. The end.